Tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Okay.
You really are. Okay, everybody, we're going to call our meeting to order. If I could be quiet, and maybe if you have a cell phone, could you put it on silence for us? We have a roll call by our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present.
Okay, we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Rigby tonight, and followed by the invocation.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our invocation tonight will be Pastor David Plank, who's a retired Navy captain or chaplain.
Eternal Father, we begin this evening by inviting your blessing upon this meeting, upon the City Council, and upon all of us gathered here. Bless, too, this beloved city of Vista, and all of us who are so grateful to call Vista home. Enable, we pray, our city leaders to be strong and courageous in the performance of their duties. May they be wise and magnanimous and always worthy of the trust that placed them here. Make all of us masters of ourselves, that we may become servants of others. This we pray in the name of God our Father. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. In accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buena Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to Buena Sanitation District Ordinance 2006-1. The next thing is our approval of our agenda by our City Manager, Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no changes to the agenda tonight.
And there were no closed sessions actually today, so we didn't have any of those. And the next thing on our agenda is our presentations. And at this time, I'm going to have the council join me down at the podium down here. And I'd like to have the representative of the California Highway Patrol to please come forward to the podium, as well as Vista Captain Chuck Cinemo and Deputies Eicherman and Gallagher. So please join us down there.
For his efforts in vehicle theft. Deputy Gallagher, in this span of 12 months, has arrested 3 vehicle thefts. So we've recovered 3 stolen vehicles with bodies, and also recovered 9 abandoned stolen vehicles for a total value of $21,700. This is Deputy Sean Gallagher's first award. So. Oh, sorry.
Can we have a picture with them too?
Sure. We have as many pictures as you want.
Come down this way. Come shake our hands. Congratulations.
Okay, and for the second award tonight, it's going to go to Deputy Tyler Eicherman, and this is actually his third award, so he's no stranger to this award. Definitely appreciate his efforts. In this time span, he's also had 3 arrests of 3 vehicle thieves, and he recovered 9 abandoned stolen vehicles for a total of 12 vehicles with a value of $69,700. So for his 3rd award, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. All of our deputies feel very safe tonight. We have lots of deputies back here. Okay, the next presentation is I'd like to have Deputy Mayor Rigby come up and join me right here, and she's going to accept her proclamation declaring February to be American Heart Health Month. And so, do you want me to read the proclamation? Then you have to. Okay, I'll read the proclamation, and then she can tell you about it a little bit. So, whereas heart disease is a risk for all Americans, and it's a leading cause of death for women, killing approximately 1 woman every minute. Over the last 11 years, the American Heart Association has made remarkable progress through its Go Red for Women campaign. However, there is still much work to do. Whereas more than 64 million Americans suffer from 1 or more forms of cardiovascular disease, including high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, congestive heart failure, stroke, and congenital heart defects that can lead to heart disease. But by developing good eating habits, being physically active, taking advantage of preventative screenings, and by avoiding drugs, tobacco, and excessive use of alcohol, individuals and families can significantly reduce the onset and burden of heart disease. So far too many Americans are unaware of the danger of cardiac arrest. About 95% of sudden cardiac arrest victims die before they reach the hospital. Therefore, the mayor and members of our Vista City Council support the efforts of the American Heart Association and encourage the residents of Vista to join the fight against heart disease, and we do hereby proclaim the month of February 2016, actually that would be the month of February, I guess that's right. I was thinking the whole year, and no, month of February, as American Heart Health Month in the city of Vista. So congratulations. And Amanda, Deputy Mayor, boy, I'm not doing very well tonight. Deputy Mayor Rigby is going to tell us a little bit about that. Okay, here you go. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor just talked about, cardiac arrest is a serious health issue, not just among adults, older adults, but young adults as well. And so this year, I am accepting this proclamation on behalf of the Eric Paredes Save a Life Foundation. And their program is Screen Your Teen, because like I said, heart issues don't affect only older adults, but also teenagers. And we have learned that sometimes it's been inadequate screening for high school athletes, and it has led to some cardiac problems and even deaths. And the Eric Paredes Save a Life Foundation, their mission is to go to working with CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation, to do high school heart screenings for their high school athletes. So they work in conjunction with that organization to screen particularly for markers of what's known as long QT syndrome, which could result in sudden cardiac arrest. And since their inception in 2010, they have screened 18,513 teenagers and found 375 cardiac abnormalities, of which 158 were considered to be at risk. And in the community of Vista alone, just in the last year, they have screened almost 300 of our high school athletes in Vista. And I believe the number I was told was they have found 3 of our students who had cardiac abnormalities and were sent for further screening. So I accept this with a full heart, no pun, but to say thank you to that organization for what they're doing to screen our young community members, and I will be taking this proclamation to them at their board meeting to thank them for what they're doing and the health impact they're having on our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'll see if I can do better now. The consent calendar is next. The recommendations on the following consent calendar, which are items C1 through C6, will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar, and any member of the public can remove an item by submitting a request to speak card to the clerk's secretary. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered immediately following the adoption of the calendar. So I don't have any requests from the public, and there are no speakers. So, yes, I have a motion for approval. A second. So please cast your votes. Consent calendar is approved unanimously. The next thing on our agenda is our discussion item, and we have just one tonight. The items scheduled for discussion generally require detailed explanation by the staff and agency member input. So tonight we have the one discussion item, which is notification requirements regarding, how do you pronounce that? PZEV? PZEV, vehicle warranties. This item was requested by Councilmember Campbell, so I'm going to ask him to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is being brought back at the direction of the council from our prior meeting, where I introduced this item regarding consumer notification for warranties for PZEV vehicles. And the city attorney drafted an ordinance containing the criteria that we described and brought forward at the prior meeting regarding a posting notification for vehicle repair facilities in the city of Vista. I'm not sure if the city attorney has any input that he'd like to provide at this time on what this item would involve from repair facilities.
Thank you. The item as drafted would require the posting of a notice informing car owners that their vehicle might be warranted for an extended warranty if they have a PZEV vehicle, which is a partial zero-emission vehicle. There is a sticker inside the car in the engine area that indicates if this is the case, and most people, we're told, are not aware that they have these extended warranty rights. They don't appear in the normal warranty booklet, and the object of Councilmember Campbell's request is to cause this notice to be posted so that individuals might be warned that instead of a 50,000-mile warranty, they actually have a 150,000-mile warranty, and all of that work is free, but they have to go to an authorized dealer to get the work done. So that is the thrust of it. We've drafted a sample notice, which would have to be further detailed out. The label that's shown in there doesn't actually say PZEV on it, but this is a mock-up of the type of notice that the repair facility would be required to post in at least an 8.5 by 11 form.
If I might.
So we're just asking to post this thing, right? Is there any? What do you expect for enforcement? Do you expect any enforcement?
No, it was not my intent that the city would take on any enforcement action for this item. The primary purpose of this is a consumer notification issue. The enforcement agencies are within the purview of the state of California. Now, it would be expected that licensed repair facilities that are licensed by the Bureau of Automobile Repair, which is the state agency, would comply with local laws and ordinances. It's unlikely that you'd have bad actors within the repair facility community for not posting this.
But we're not going to enforce whether they post it or not. The city's not going to.
It would be right.
We're not going to get involved in that.
That's not the intent.
Okay.
The intent is to, as the ordinance says, that the city manager would inform the repair facilities that they're required to post this, and it would be an ordinance within the city. The main issue regarding a lot of these warranties is that it's a very difficult, convoluted system that is really quite simple at the end of the day. If you have a vehicle identifying that PZEV vehicle for the repair facility is extremely easy to do. It's a sticker under the hood of the vehicle or in the engine compartment that says PZEV. But most people don't know what that means. It's not in the repair book. It's not in the warranty book for most automobiles. And most people aren't going to go looking through the California Code of Regulations to find what kind of warranty they have on their vehicle. A lot of people purchase unknowingly extended warranties for their vehicles for vehicles that are covered under this. So the only issue with this type of warranty is that it does have to be taken, as the city attorney said, to an authorized franchise dealership. And so local repair facilities that are independent repair shops, in most cases, are not authorized to provide the work at no charge. So it leaves the choice up to the consumer. It's just a matter of consumer awareness. And if the consumer chooses to pay to have their vehicle repaired at the independent auto shop, knowing that it might be done free somewhere else, that's their choice.
I see I got speakers here. So Deputy Mayor Rigby.
So this is a consumer issue, and you already stated that the agencies that would enforce these type of things are state agencies. So why is the Consumer Affairs Agency of California not mandating this? It seems that this is a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, and if we're going to mandate that they post this, but there's no enforcement, I'm not sure the point of it or the use of resources, and then also putting the burden on a shop owner to tell people that he might not be the best place for them to bring their car and to turn their business away. So if this is a problem where the car dealers, the manufacturers, are not putting this information readily available in their handbooks and in their warranties, why has this not been brought up by Consumer Affairs?
It's actually a very good question. I would encourage the council, for us as a city, to write them a letter to encourage them to do that. However, as you are probably aware, the state agencies are not often the most efficient agencies in terms of expediency for preparing items like this. It may take years before a state regulation was drafted and implemented that would require the state BAR to require licensed facilities to compel their licensees to make these sort of postings. So in my mind, this is an area that we do have the ability to enter into. It's not an occupied space legally for us to make these requirements for consumer postings. We obviously have other much more stringent business requirements locally on certain entities that are licensed separately, such as tobacco retailer licensing that we require here in the city. That is obviously heavily state regulated, but we took it a step further. This isn't an additional licensing requirement. This is just a consumer notification requirement. The issue primarily within the state field is that even if you call the state consumer affairs offices, they don't know what this is about frequently. So that's an issue they need to work on. When you call the Bureau of Automobile Repair, they refer you over to the California Department of Insurance. The California Department of Insurance doesn't know because it's not an insurance issue. So the last thing we want to really have is just throwing it and saying this is the state's responsibility, let them handle it, when this is an obscure warranty provision, but it does provide an exceptional level of coverage for a large percentage of vehicles on the road. So it's a matter of us being able to step in and set a good example moving forward, in my opinion.
So I have a follow-up question, if I may. So you just said that consumers who might have a question or issue would call the state agency who is not really familiar with the issue themselves. So my question, I guess, would be for the city attorney, in that I see on here the flyer, the mock-up flyer, where it says posted pursuant to Vista Municipal Code, putting our name on it. So if they're calling Consumer Affairs or they're calling the state and there's no answer or action, and yet we're mandating this, is a consumer going to have an issue or any type of an issue that would arise with the auto shop that they've gone to with their warranty question or their repair question? What does that open the city up to as far as any action or complaint? And then maybe the city manager could discuss the issue of, if this is an area where we're stepping into an arena kind of outside of our wheelhouse and we're going to be getting phone calls and questions and we're going to have to start managing these because the state isn't, what is that going to mean as far as increasing staff time for these types of things? So I'll let the city attorney go.
Well, legally, it doesn't impose any additional obligations on us in terms of possible phone contact. I think the city manager can answer that part of the question.
If I might say one comment first. As the city manager and I actually talked about on this particular issue yesterday, there is actually, after significant research on my part a couple of months ago, a state agency that's very obscure that does actually have more direct impact over this particular item, and that's the agency and phone number contact that I suggested be added to the final posting notification that would allow a consumer to contact the correct agency that would be able to handle warranty complaints for this particular warranty.
And that could certainly be added down there on the further information tagline.
So as far as posting this notice, are you expecting or anticipating that the auto shops that these cars are taken to would point to the notice and tell them to investigate their car themselves, or are they allowed to just leave it there for people to read it if they want to read it and go ahead about their day and take in the business? What is the end goal for this for you?
The end goal ultimately, as is stated in the California Code of Regulations, is that the consumer be notified that if the engine light is on, their vehicle, whatever is the cause of that engine light being on, is covered under warranty if it's a PZEV vehicle. A lot of older vehicles are not PZEV vehicles. A lot of newer ones are. Some vehicles are PZEV going back about 10 or 11 years. And the ultimate goal is that if someone brings their vehicle in, it's brought in for diagnostic work. The repair facility is immediately aware that it's a PZEV vehicle, or in 5 seconds they could be made aware of that if they looked. And if the check engine light is on, the consumer would be notified immediately that they should read this posting because their vehicle may qualify under this posting.
So somebody has a PZEV vehicle, and is that a marketing in today's society with partial emissions or zero emissions because vehicles, is that something that people go to a car dealership looking for, a partial emission vehicle, that
No.
they would know it?
No.
Is there any way for them to discover that they have a partial emission vehicle? So salespeople aren't selling the fact that it's partial emissions and it's good for the environment.
No. That's not the case.
So okay. I still am of the mind that the onus and the burden should be on the consumer to know what they're driving and what their warranty is. And I'm still not clear that it's not going to be, if not now, at some point in the future, expected that auto shop owners and technicians would be turning business away. And I'm not sure that that's what we want to be doing.
The RAND Institute actually was commissioned several years ago by the state to do an entire study on the impact of the PZEV warranty on independent auto dealerships and what sort of economic benefit or harm it causes overall. Overall, their analysis is that it causes a net positive economic benefit because more people get serious repairs done to their car because they're not having to fork over $3,000-$4,000 for work that they may otherwise not have done to their vehicle. Frequently, emissions control systems on vehicles malfunction. The car is running, to the consumer, it appears to run okay. Their check engine light comes on, they take it to their repair shop, they get told that it's going to be a $3,000 repair, their catalytic converter is not working properly. Well, to the consumer, many people, they're not going to have that work done. The check engine light's obnoxious, but they're going to keep driving it for 2-3 more years until they're required to get it repaired to pass a smog check. Under this law, the PZEV warranty law, they could have that repaired at the dealership for free. So for me, if I was a consumer in the city, I would want the city council to do everything within our power to provide consumers more knowledge and empower them to be able to know their vehicle's covered. They can take it to the dealership or the authorized franchised warranty center and get it repaired at no charge. I would ask, were you aware of this warranty coverage prior to this item being brought up? I would ask anybody that. And I would say 9 times out of 10, most people are going to say, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So just passing the onus off to the consumer for this issue or any other issue that's an obscure issue within the code of regulations of the state, I think is a little disingenuous to the consumer, because it's our purpose, or at least it's my purpose, is consumer education. Now, there may be times where it's a small repair, the person doesn't want to have to deal with having their car towed to the dealership, but there are independent auto dealerships out there. I've actually spoken to one of them who says, this sort of item is good because it gives better reputation to independent auto dealerships for showing that they're more trustworthy for warranty repair work, for notifying the consumer. So I would like to have this item go forward just for the purpose of consumer education. We're not putting an onus on the repair shop that says you have to research the vehicle. It's not difficult to research this issue. You're not trying to find out if it's a PZEV vehicle. It's immediately information on the vehicle, but it's small on the sticker. And it's not something that most people are going to go look under their car and go, I wonder what this means. I'm going to go Google it online and spend hours researching this. Because this is not something, if you go Google, what is the PZEV warranty in California? It doesn't pop up right away. You don't know if your vehicle's eligible right away. It doesn't tell you, go look under the sticker on the car. So that's what this is doing.
But you are expecting, with the posting of this, somebody plugs the car in, a technician plugs the car in, and then has to have the conversation with the consumer that you probably would take your car over somewhere else.
And I would
so
hope,
you are expecting that, and what would you're not expecting enforcement of a shop that does not do that.
there's a balancing act to be done. I mean, with every ordinance that we put forward, obviously, if there's one shop that the state gets 5 or 6 complaints on, the state's going to come in and analyze and evaluate that shop and investigate them on other matters altogether. Just like with any industry, there's always bad apples out there. I would expect most repair facilities that are legitimate and want to continue a business relationship with customers in the future to comply with state and local ordinances.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Cody.
Councilor Aguilera.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just had a couple questions. Clarification. The things that are covered, the items that are covered, are strictly related to smog, I believe, right?
The California Code of Regulations specifically says whatever the cause of the check engine light coming on is covered. So it actually uses specifically the word any. So any malfunctioning component of the vehicle that is causing the vehicle's onboard diagnostic indicator light to illuminate is covered for 10 years.
Brakes?
That would not cause the vehicle malfunction indicator light to illuminate. So
Depends on the car, I think. But
no,
okay,
there's different malfunction indicator lights. Some are more serious than others, and it's the universal, under Title 13, it is the malfunction indicator light. So there's actually most vehicles, I think yours in particular actually has different lights for brake wear, for all sorts of different systems that would malfunction. But if it's part of the engine light, which is described in Section 2037B2, it specifically means the onboard diagnostic engine malfunction indicator light. And so there is a legal term for what that light is.
Okay. Do we have an idea of how many cars are on the road that are PZEV?
Millions. But there's no specific exact number how many are operating currently within the state, because that would require multiple state agencies to cooperate and say how many are currently licensed.
I tried to look it up, and what I saw was 1 million approximately in 2014 or something like that.
Right. I think that was what was sold prior to a certain date, which was, I believe, 2011.
12, I think.
Or 12 or 11,
12.
yeah.
So, because I just trying to figure this out, I mean, if there's 30 million cars in California, we're talking about 3.5%. So,
And of the current vehicles that are being sold that are small passenger cars, it's a very high percentage of those, because ultimately this all comes back to a complicated scheme formula for credits, for what's called zero-emission vehicle credits,
right.
because the state requires that automobile manufacturers, to maintain the privilege of selling vehicles in the state, sell X number of ZEVs. Well, very few ZEVs are sold because the technology...
So you get to add up partial zeros?
Right. They add up the partial zero emission
Partial zero.
vehicle. You get the partial zero, which I believe currently, let's just say it's a 0.2 credit. So for every 5 PZEV vehicles they sell, they get credit for 1 ZEV vehicle, which goes to that total amount.
Okay.
So it's a trade-off system.
I forget, we have a lot of students out there, so I can't, part of zero is still zero in my book, but it's a different math, I guess.
I finally understand why I can't divide by 0.
So one of my questions, I think has already been answered, is what is the cost to the city?
I would assume that it would be...
I mean, we're going to, someone
zero.
mentioned to me that we might be handing out plaques, which sounds like it's going to cost money, or are we just going to be sending
No, I
notices?
would be sending notifications probably to somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 businesses, and we'd make the placard available in an electronic format for them to be able to use.
Okay. And then would code enforcement be involved at all with this in the future?
I would assume not.
Okay. So there would be no penalty from the city. There would be no time taken out from code enforcement on other things.
That I would be...
Because we, like we've already talked about, potentially hiring a code enforcement officer for parking, and that type of thing. So I just couldn't imagine.
I would assume that, as with other items, if the city for some reason got a complaint on this, which I would assume would be rare if that occurred, for a business that failed to comply with this, maybe the city manager could elaborate more, but I would assume that they would get a notice in the mail or a phone call from economic development or someone to say, hey, maybe you forgot to put this up. I would assume we would get cooperation from those businesses.
I think, as most of you know, the typical process is for code enforcement to respond to complaints that are in our code. Code officer would go out and notify a business that they're not in compliance, would give them a notice of violation, and then would check back after a certain period of time, whether that's 5-7 days. And then if they're still not in compliance, it's very likely that our next step, if we want to remedy that situation, would be a citation.
I thought you said there was going to be no enforcement by the city. Was that going to be enforcing? There's no enforcement.
I'm guessing the city manager is saying that it would fall under our standard admin process for enforcement, and that would be solely complaint-driven, I'm assuming.
It looks like we could penalize the business if they didn't have it up there, and I thought this is like a voluntary thing that they could put
No, this would not be voluntary.
that they could put it up there, but
No,
we're not going to enforce that.
This is an ordinance. So I'm guessing, from what it sounds like with the city manager, that would only be complaint-driven.
Yeah, but somebody could get mean and go around the businesses and look and see if it's up there. It could be.
Yeah,
suppose.
the purpose of my question is just to make sure that we're not overburdening
Code
our code enforcement. And the second part of that, in addition to that, is that we're not singling out businesses and basically being not friendly to businesses.
Right. Well, and that was obviously not my intention, to be not friendly to businesses, but at the same time, I do want to make sure that businesses post this. So that's why it's not it's not a letter asking them, would you mind putting this up there? Most businesses would throw it in the trash right away. But if it's an ordinance or required to post it, I would assume most of them would post it. And I'm not sure that we're going to send code enforcement around checking businesses to do this. If people wanted to be business unfriendly, or say you get somebody who wants to go around and file a bunch of complaints, I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds of other items in the community currently that they could complain about to send code enforcement to go enforce.
Well, and
Actually, I know personally.
That's my point, is we have plenty of other code enforcement issues with businesses, some that I know you're aware of, that are much more detrimental to our city and, the outlook of our city that need to be dealt with before code enforcement starts getting involved with some of these issues.
And there are, as you and I both know, dozens and dozens upon dozens of issues that are in the community currently, but because code enforcement is primarily complaint-driven, those issues stay there until somebody calls and complains. And
I also know that one business may not like another business, because I used to work in that shop, and they're a bunch of jerks. And you know what? This is how we can get them.
So I would say this about that. There's actually a complaint system within the Bureau of Automobile Repair that they would be much more likely to utilize, because they'll actually send out undercover investigators to that business and post online that those businesses have received X number of complaints, or the BBB, which is much more of a public way to potentially harass businesses. So I would say there are, not to allay those concerns, I would say there are substantially more impactful complaint options that, should someone be vindictive, they could utilize to inflict harm to another business, than they didn't put this posting up. And we're going to call the City of Vista code enforcement, which would require them to know the process for doing that, going through and calling code enforcement and trying to remain anonymous, which I don't think we accept. Do we accept anonymous complaints?
No, we do not.
Right. So my assumption would be that they would not wish to identify themselves, file a formal complaint against another business.
Sounds like you've done your homework on these complaints, so just leave it at that.
Councilmember Franklin, you had me on this until there was an enforcement part of it. And if it's a public service announcement and they were going to post it, then I would say, oh, okay. But if they're going to be penalized or for not, then I can't. I'm going the other way. Then
I can ask this to the city attorney potentially, or the city manager: is there an alternative enforcement mechanism that we could attach to this?
Well, we said no enforcement.
Well, if we say, I think the term...
That's a state thing. It's a state rule, so they can enforce it. But why? I don't want to enforce it. I don't mind telling people, giving them the information, but I don't want to have the City of Vista enforce a state law. I guess. Let's hear from Councilmember Franklin, and we'll go from there.
First off, why don't we accept anonymous complaints of code violations?
Because somebody could submit 50 anonymous complaints, and we're not sure if they're valid. We want to be able to make sure that we can correspond with the person, understand what the nature of the complaint is, and make sure that it's a legitimate complaint. Or else I think in the conversation of things that just occurred here, somebody could make it their point to fill up hours and hours and months of code's time that may not be legitimate complaints.
So if I want to complain that my neighbor is breaking the municipal code, then my neighbor has to be informed that I'm the one that, no?
No, we do not inform. So if you complained about your neighbor, that would be anonymous.
Oh.
It would be anonymous to
So
your
if I
neighbor.
want to make a complaint against a business,
relinquish your name,
then I have
but
to
we would enforce it.
So if I want to make a complaint about a business, then I have to be identifiable?
You have to provide your information to the city. That's correct.
The city, not to them.
The city does not release your name,
I see,
though, to the business that you complained about.
Okay. Just curious. That one caught my attention. To the matter at hand, a couple of concerns that have occurred to me. One is the matter of dilution. There are already many requirements for the posting of public notices at every type of business. And I have noticed at auto repair facilities there are a number of things the legislature has already mandated to be posted. And I concern myself that this is one more item. And sometimes when I'm the kind of guy that sometimes when I'm waiting on my tires to be installed, I actually read some of this stuff. I guess I'm kind of nerdy that way. But there's only so much time that anybody has to read these things. And my concern by the continual adding of more and more is that we dilute what the consumer has time to absorb while they're in the store. I could go on at length, but I think it's been observed that there's significant burden in complying with any regulation, primarily because of the vast quantity of regulations which must be complied with. And when placed together, every small, piece of hay adds up to a bale. And I really concern myself with that because we're palletizing and stacking the bales of hay now on businesses in this state. Concerned with the size of this, is this going to be the actual final size, and will businesses be required to post this to scale?
Yes, it's 8.5 by 11.
This
That's
is
the size that's
pretty
specified.
gigantic when I compare it with some of the notices that I've seen that are required. A lot of them being a third of a page or a half of a page. This one is fairly substantial in size, and I think pretty soon our businesses could expect to paper the insides of their businesses with these types of notices. That's concerning to me. And I would also observe that why would we only make this, actually before I leave the issue of burden on businesses, could I, if I own an automobile repair business, if, say, I failed in my obligation to post this notice, and then I performed some work which might have been repairable under one of these warranties, could I then suffer a civil action, and could the case brought against me be impacted negatively against my, out of my favor because of my failure to abide by this action?
I don't think that the failure to abide by that action would alone
but might it
constitute
compound
a
my
cause, but it certainly could impact it in an evidentiary way to
Right.
suggest that the owner was deliberately deceiving the customer.
which may or may not be the case depending upon the hypothetical situation. So I think there's some issue there about what are we, what kind of liability are we potentially creating, or how are we changing suits at law here? But then I was going to say, why would we only, if we're going to require this, why would we only address PZEV vehicles? Many vehicles, if you go to a private non-dealer repair shop, many vehicles may be covered by a warranty, and the owner may or may not be aware of what their warranty coverages are. Oftentimes manufacturers do apply different levels of warranty to powertrains versus other items. And so I wonder why we wouldn't come up with several additional pages, perhaps about volume, to alert consumers as to which other parts. And also, when I bought my last set of brake pads, I noticed that they had a certain mileage warranty on them, and wiper blades guaranteed to last a certain length of time. And I wonder why we wouldn't take all these different parts and, when they're manufactured, add and update this notice to include, because some of these items are small, some of them could be large, some of them could be thousands of dollars, and if the consumer is not properly advised, then in a similar fashion they could suffer the same kind of fate. And I jest a little bit, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make the point that this is not a new problem that is occurring with PZEV vehicles. This problem of going to a repairman, I think I told the story, but I like it so much I'm going to tell it again. When I was 16, I went to a certain Jiffy business to have my oil changed, and they called me out into the shop floor. I knew nothing about cars at the time. And they opened my air vent container, and they showed me my air vent, my air filter. And the guy said to me, "Look at this. Don't you think you need a new one?" And I looked at him and I said, "I don't know. That's what I'm paying you for. I don't have any idea what an air filter should look like or how long it should last." But shortly thereafter, I informed myself and I found out the answer to that question, so I'd never have to suffer that again. And now I do my research on my handheld phone because I have the internet at my disposal. And every time, and let me tell you, I've saved a lot of money because as an educated consumer, I talk to my phone and I say, "Hey Google, tell me about this thing I'm getting ready to." They want to hit me up for an oxygen sensor, and they want $500, and I start doing my research, and I find out I can get one for $125 and put it in myself. I've done that. I really have. So I mean, I think there's no amount of signage that's going to alleviate the burden on the consumer's part to be a good consumer and to price check and to discover what their rights are. The fact is, legislatures at all 4 levels of government have created a lot of protections. Manufacturers and dealers have made a lot of warranties, and it is complicated. And I acknowledge, and I know that bad experiences have been had, and there's a reason for this. But I think, why just this one problem? Would we address this one and call it out? And then how many more pages would we have to add if we realized that there's a million PZEV vehicles? What if there's 5 million vehicles in another class? Then do we have to have a notice for that? I mean, so that's a problem or a concern of mine. The code enforcement issue, I mean, certainly my experience, and I've had this experience with this exact industry in our city, where the owner of one business says to me, "Look, I was approached about this code enforcement action, and now I want this other business to be treated with the same to the same standard." And so businesses do play this sort of tit for tat with one another. And if they happen to walk in and they don't see something that's, they may well lodge a complaint. And then if people complain, then we're going to have to start issuing citations, I guess. And it's one more thing. I told Patrick I'm a great fan of this phrase in the Declaration of Independence. The Continental Congress accused King George of sending forth swarms of bureaucrats to eat out their substance. And I think it's exactly what we do to our citizens and our businesses today. We have created swarms of bureaucrats to eat out their substance, swarms of regulations, miles and miles of text that have to be read and to be understood by business people. And I think that we go too far. And I think this is an opportunity where, and what I would suggest, 2 things. One, because PZEV vehicles likely will not exist in 15 years, something else, hopefully, the hydrogen car or the water car will have replaced it, Google's self-driving, or hopefully the folks at Star Trek will finally have that transporter thing figured out. That's what I'm really pulling for. But we should have a sunset on this of 10 or 15 years where we bring it back if we adopt this. That way we don't, I just like to point out the telephone tax to finance the Spanish-American War was imposed about 1912. Congress repealed that tax of 1% on your telephone. It was a luxury tax at the time, so only wealthy people could afford a telephone. They repealed that tax in about 2002. The government collected that tax for all those years, long after they'd repaid the debt of the Spanish-American War. So it's important to readdress things on a regular time period, and I would suggest if we adopt this, that we do place some sort of reasonable sunset. And I would also suggest that we add a line at the bottom that says that a violation of this ordinance does not constitute, is not punishable by infraction. How can we wordsmith it so that it's actually not a ticketable or, it's an advisory. We can put things in law that say it would be a great idea if you were to, but if you don't, there's no action we can take against you. Certainly that's possible.
Well, we'd obviously have to revise the ordinance and make reference to the enforcement provisions of the Vista Municipal Code and state that they do not apply.
Yeah, so we could do that if we wanted to. So, I think if we were going to do it, if we were going to mandate it, I'd like to see it be at least half the size that it is. Because, again, when we compare it with all the other things that have to be posted, I think there are a lot of things that have to get posted. I know myself, I have approximately 4-foot by 8-foot section of the wall in my business covered with laws, with posters mandated by the state and the federal government. And I have even documents from the city of Vista. Don't check; they might be in my file drawer instead of on the wall. I'll fix it tomorrow, I promise. But there are all these things that have to be right, exactly. But there's all these things that have to be affixed to the wall, and I think this is maybe a little bit big. So, for the moment, that's my input.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of follow-ups. When we were talking about enforcement, Section 9.40.020 states that the notification placard shall be placed in a conspicuous location open to customers where customers will have an opportunity to read it. And then the next section talks about the repair advisement, where the repair facility would, one, provide the customer with a repair advisement, or two, would cease work until the customer authorizes resumption of engine work. And in the discussion of enforcement, this says shall be and et cetera. The language would intimate that there would be enforcement. And if we were to enact something like this with nothing stating that we're not enforcing it, it's very easy, exceedingly easy to come back at a later date and say, well, we're going to have to enforce this. We're going to have some teeth into this. You can't have this language and you can't have this item and not have some expectation of follow-up for consumers. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of. And so the enforcement of that would be, as was stated earlier, probably somebody would complain about it. They didn't get it because it says here in writing or verbally. People will expect it to be in writing. They didn't get it. It wasn't timely. They're going to make a phone call. They're going to file a complaint. We're going to send a notice of violation, which has a fine attached to it. And the road goes on, which is going to cost staff time. It's going to cost money for businesses. It's going to cost business for businesses. And I think that that's an inefficient use of our resources as a city. And I think that to say that you assume there would be no enforcement when reading this, that was a little bit surprising for me that you would use that word, that you assume not, when there can be nothing but enforcement of this. And if it's not going to be enforced, then there are other avenues to look at, because I agree, consumers might not be aware, although honestly, I'm very much aware of the kind of car I bought and what my contract says and what my warranty says. So I do think that there is a responsibility as a consumer to be a good consumer, but there are people out there who do need some protection. Hence, we have the Consumer Affairs Agency. So I think if we wanted to be good advocates on behalf of our consumers and our community, there are other avenues to put the word out there. We have avenues with our social media. We have avenues through our community newsletter. We have nonprofit organizations who are consumer advocates that could put the word out that, maybe that's an avenue that we could use as well to get the word out for people. So I cannot support this on any level, but what I would support, as Councilman Campbell had commented earlier, this is something that's more in the wheelhouse of a state agency, an agency that you had referenced, I forget the name of it, but also Consumer Affairs, which this is directly related to what they do. And if we wanted to put a letter from the council to Consumer Affairs saying that the City of Vista recognizes that this has become an issue and could you, please address this on your level. I don't know what the verbiage would be, but if we want to be good advocates for the consumers in Vista, there are other ways to do it besides have an ordinance that would be burdensome to the city and to the businesses in our community, because I don't think that is what we want to be doing.
Councilor Campbell.
A couple of follow-ups with that. I'm kind of disappointed in the sense of the following, is that I've heard arguments taking parts of both sides of this, trying to say there's reasons not to inform consumers. Consumers do need to be informed, directing it's the state's responsibility. We don't want to do it. That aside, I did want to comment the posting size requirement. This is actually very small for auto repair facilities. Many of their postings for consumer notifications, not the employee notifications that are in the back room, those giant posters, are frequently much larger than this. Frequently, they're 4 times the size. to be noticed on the wall. That said, in terms of complaints and enforcement, I think there's a really easy fix for this, in that we can, maybe the city attorney could agree or not agree with this, but if we put language that complaints shall be directed to the Bureau of Automobile Repair, which handle all licensing issues with matters relating to state and local law or federal law issues, and say that the City of Vista shall not be responsible or will not accept consumer complaints for items like this. That might be an option to alleviate our enforcement of the posting obligations. And then it would enable the consumer, should they have an issue and the licensee has additional unscrupulous business practices, which do occur, that would enable the consumer to have an additional tool to file a complaint with the Bureau of Automobile Repair against the licensee should valid concerns exist. That would make it to where we're not becoming an enforcement agency within that realm of automobile repair industry. But it would still be an ordinance, not a voluntary kind request that they would please make this posting, because just asking them to do that, they would possibly have already done something, or like certain businesses, one that I actually spoke to, does inform their customers that it's under warranty, you need to take it to the dealership, which is what we would hope that more independent auto repair facilities would do. To address Councilmember Franklin's concern, why don't we address every possible type of warranty out there? And quite frankly, the simple answer is this. That's in the warranty book for your automobile that says quite plainly what's covered under drivetrain warranties, what's covered under your bumper-to-bumper warranty. Most people are aware for 36,000 miles or 50,000 miles to take it to the dealership for warranty repair. The other side of that is, not to get too deep into the weeds on warranty law, but the federal warranty law regarding certain high-priced emissions parts can be covered at independent auto repair facilities. So those are covered under warranty, whether you take it to the dealership or an independent shop. This particular law is very specific. It covers a large number of vehicles, and it covers everything when the light comes on. So it creates no burden on the repair facility to identify whether or not that particular component may be covered or not. It's just a very simple blanket. The yellow light is on. Take it to the dealership. It will be free. That's the simple statement that they're required to make. In terms of enforcement, it's obviously written for repair advisement. The repair advisements are within California law anyway, regarding estimates, regarding repairs, and notifications to consumer if they drop their vehicle off. There are requirements built in how those written and or verbal advisements are required to go. So obviously sometimes, as Deputy Mayor Rigby said, you're going to get some consumers who say, I never got the notification. That happens currently. That's something that the Bureau of Automobile Repair and the Consumer Affairs Agency resolves. That's not for us to decide. And in terms of assuming that there would be limited complaints over this, that assumption is made because of the simple fact that there are very few complaints currently against auto repair facilities in totality. So adding an additional posting requirement, there are businesses now, if you go in, that do not have all of the legally mandated postings on the wall. But unless you are an expert in what postings are required, you're not going to call and make a complaint that they didn't have their posting. And if businesses wanted to file complaints against each other, as I said previously, they could send somebody in to other businesses that don't have the state-mandated postings or the federal mandated postings and file complaints, which would carry a much more serious penalty than our posting potential.
But it's harder to deal with state big bureaucracy than it would be for our code enforcement. So I just want to be somebody to convince me that our code enforcement we aren't going to make complaints at our code enforcement, and we're going to go out there and issue any citations.
Yes.
If you can assure me of that, I don't have a problem with posting a piece of paper on the wall.
So if the city attorney could tell me how this sort of approach would work. Making a carve-out to say that the standard municipal code enforcement penalties do not apply and that the complaints shall be directed to the Bureau of Automobile Repair for licensee requirements.
Perhaps the most expeditious way, based on the commentary to date that I've heard, is to simply not address this through the vehicle of an ordinance, but ask staff to send a letter with the notice to all of the agencies, as well as a letter to the state recommending that they address this through their regulatory process. That puts the notice in the hands of all of the repair shops. It keeps it out of the municipal code, and it keeps it out of any local enforcement requirements.
It sounds like the direction we're going in, so.
I like that.
Okay, so somebody make a motion.
I'll move what the city attorney said.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Just to comment, you can't have something in the code and then put a notice on the end of it that says this is not subject to code enforcement. That's
Yeah, it's duplicative.
it doesn't work.
Okay, cast your votes, please. Okay, we got. Why did you abstain?
I do not support that action.
This was your thing.
Well, I've already contacted the state agencies separately. Now, I will make a comment, as you may be aware, that asking the state regulatory process to take place will result in far more substantial penalties for independent repair facilities than anything that we could have ever done for noncompliance.
Okay, so moving on, we do have no public hearings tonight, and I don't think we have any oral communications either tonight. So with that, I will go to remarks.
Yeah, I'll make one quick one. If that's okay, Mayor.
It's okay.
So I guess just a reminder to be careful out there with the railroad crossings. Today we had a sprinter fatality in San Marcos, and in Escondido an injury on a bike from Breeze bus. So anyways, I only bring it up because I sit on the NCTD board, and we have at least, I think, one fatality on the railways each month here in San Diego County. And, it's definitely preventable. And, some of them are really legitimate accidents. Others are something else. But please be careful out there. I mean, you're not going to win against the sprinter. So that's it.
Okay. Councilor Campbell.
No comments.
Councilor Frank. Deputy Mayor. Okay, wait. I lost my, I had some comments here, but I don't know where they are. Just them. Oh, thank you. Okay, so I just have announcements, my local announcements here. Vista Library is holding free Valentine card making session at 11 o'clock this Saturday, February 13th at the Vista Library. So preschoolers, toddlers, and teens are welcome to go and make some free Valentine cards. Vista Fire Department is recruiting residents interested in learning basic disaster response skills such as fire safety, light search and rescue, and disaster medical operations. The Community Emergency Response Team, the CERT team classes, begin April 13th, and you can register online at vistascert.org. And also, don't forget the AARP volunteers will be at McClellan Adult Activity Center to provide assistance with taxes for the 2015 tax year. To schedule an appointment, call 760-643-5290, 760-643-5290. I'll turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things. One, to touch on what Councilman Aguilera said, and that is to encourage pedestrians to cross at crosswalks and signalize intersections. Yesterday, we had a pedestrian fatality in the city as a result of somebody crossing mid-block. So it's very important to pay attention to those laws. And just to let the public know that City Hall and the library will be closed on Monday in observance of President's Day, and trash pickup will remain intact, but the city facility and county facility will be closed. Thank you.
City Attorney?
I have nothing further this evening. Thank you.
How about our City Clerk? Any announcements tonight? Okay, it looks like we're adjourned. That's